exciting moment to have those conversations, and particularly today with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. It's a particular pleasure, maybe a particular challenge also, because you are one of the most admired business leaders in the world. You have done something which so much fits into the philosophy which we are promoting this during this annual meeting, to be environmentally, to be carbon neutral, and you do even more in your announcement. You do not only commit to be carbon neutral in a relatively short time, but you say we want to recuperate from the air all the bad stuff which Microsoft has sent into the air since its creation, I think 40 years ago. Now let me ask you the first question. You are today the most valuable company in the world, and you always have been a promoter of this notion to create long-term shared value. And we discuss here the adoption of a comprehensive, unified ESG measurement system, but you have been a pioneer. You have submitted your company to all kinds of criteria. Now, what is your recipe? I put it in a very short question. What is your recipe to do good and to do well at the same time?
First of all, it's great to be back and to do this chat with you, Klaus. And it's fantastic to, in particular, this year's forum, I think, has even a particularly different tenor even. And it's thanks to sort of a lot of what you have set in motion. So when I look at what's the social purpose of a firm or a corporation, if last year perhaps there were more books written on capitalism and how capitalism needs to be redefined than ever before. And one such book written by an Oxford economist called Colin Mayer, there's a very good definition of the social purpose of a firm, where he says a corporation finds profitable solutions to the challenges of people and planet. Right? The key word is profitable, because we do know that capitalism does have the ability to allocate resources in the most efficient way. But the other key word is the challenges of people in the planet. It's not about creating more challenges for people in the planet, but to have real solutions to the problems. I like that. In fact, as a platform company at Microsoft, it's not about even doing ESG for ESG's sake. The core business model of the company is this business model. If we succeed, will there be economic growth that's broad spread? Will the economic growth be inclusive? Will we build more trust in technology? And of course now, can we even ensure that through our engagement in the world, there is a more sustainable planet? So I think it comes down to having that core business design incorporate, when you do well, the world around you does well. And if you get that right, then a lot of things fall in place. But if you're trying to just use these as Band-Aids, and your core business model, your core operation is not aligned with the world, then you have a real challenge.
Satya, could you formulate it in the following ways, that you say, not to find any more solutions for your clients, but to find solutions for society? That should be the purpose of a company. And of course, by finding solutions for society, you find your clients and yourself.
That's correct.
Clients.
That's correct. And people, we all exist. I think that's kind of perhaps the most obvious thing sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
People and institutions are all part of our society. And they all are on our planet. And so if you don't sort of think about the broader context, the very system that we have come to depend on is not stable.
Satya, when I was preparing, following our, let's say, attempts since many years and the US Business Roundtable Declaration, and I defend this notion of stakeholdership inclusive capitalism. The criticism I always get relates to the CEO remuneration. Can you say, I know it's a very sensitive question, but can you say some word about it, how you feel?
You know, I think it's definitely a good topic to discuss. I mean, at the end of the day, if I look at the inequities in the world, remuneration of anybody, whether it's a CEO or whether it's a return on capital, all of those are, I think, worthwhile things to be debated. Now, the question ultimately goes back to is, what is the market saying and what is the society saying? There's a fantastic book I recently read where it's called The Narrow Corridor. It's written by, I think, two economists, where they sort of say it's the real constant tension between what does a society want, and then in that case, he talks about what does the government want, and these are the two centers of power. And you have to find that narrow corridor. And similarly, I believe, between markets, democracies, and liberal values, we have to find the corridor that works, where there isn't anything that's out of kilter, whether it's the CEO pay or let's talk about it. Like somebody described it to me, hey, CEOs is still labor. By the way, there's a bigger return. It's called the capital. So if you want to litigate where the returns are, let's litigate all of it.
When I wrote the Davos Manifesto 2020, of course I was confronted with this issue. And I walked this corridor by saying the executive remuneration should not be only tied to profit, but should be tied also to the ESG achievements. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. In fact, the way I have sort of interpreted it is, take all of the initiatives we've done. I actually go make the case to our shareholders that it is in their long-term interest that we do what we're doing. So, for example, I'll give you even a very practical thing we did. A few years ago, we said we want to extend our parental leave and sick leave, not just to our employees, but even to the vendors who work. Because after all, they're working right in the same offices and having very disparate benefits. Makes no sense. So we said, okay, how do we do that? Of course, we have to pay for it. In other words, we will have to subsidize it. So that's profit out of our bottom line. And at the same time, no employee at Microsoft will feel good about working at Microsoft if they don't feel that we're doing the right thing. And our shareholders should care about our employees feeling good. And so I think the CEOs do in today's world have more of work to do to communicate clearly that stakeholder capitalism is somehow not against shareholders. In fact, it is for the shareholders' long-term benefit.
It's more the clash between short-term and long-term, and not between, let's say, shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism.
That is absolutely right.
If I may change the subject, in the name of national security, for example, you cannot sell your products in China anymore, I think from 23 on, to governmental units. Are you concerned that the world is developing in the direction of two circles, with each with its own technology rules, and actually we create this technology Cold War? What is your, because you are very, very well implanted in China, and what is your feeling and your reaction, and what would you suggest?
You know, first of all, I would start by saying, look, every country does deeply care about their national security and their national interest, even broadly, if I said, whether that's why they care about their trade and having fair trade deals. They care about their national security, and I think that will always be the case. But that said, I think here's the way I would at least urge us to think about what should happen. If we sort of consciously, quote unquote, decouple, whether it's the internet or the trading spheres or what have you, all we will do is increase the overall transactional costs of our economy, and everybody will be worse off. I think that's just going to be what will happen. I'll always go back. I immigrated to the United States in '88. Then I went and studied, and the Berlin Wall fell in '89. And then I went and joined the software industry in '90. And it was kind of like winning 3 lotteries in sequence. And the 30-year period has been just an amazing period of market access, the ability to expand into all corners of the world. And I do feel in the tech industry we do need to grow up because the world is a little more complicated than that. And our responsibilities are more. But that said, I think any decoupling without some thought into how we can come up with mechanisms. For example, I believe trust in technology is something that the world will need more norms around, right? Take cybersecurity. We've called for the Geneva Convention around cybersecurity. We have called for, and
you were very active. And
very active in it. Same thing on the AI ethics. I think take even the topic of AI ethics.
Yeah.
I think China cares as deeply about AI ethics as the United States. To assume that somehow the Chinese people and the Chinese government are also not going to worry about the implications of AI run wild would be a problem. And so therefore, I think both the United States and China and the European Union having a set of principles that govern what this technology can mean in our societies and the world at large is probably more in need today than it was in the last 30 years.
Now, one of the key issues in the economy of today is how we handle data. And I think it was you who at least you spoke out for data dignity. And of course, we have a tension. How much do we protect privacy? How much do we use the potential of those data for good?
Yeah.
Now, you have expressed yourself on several occasions. Could you just repeat what is your opinion about this whole issue of privacy, which worries so many people? And how can we guarantee privacy and, on the other hand, still use the data, for example, for medical purposes and so on?
Sure. I mean, there are a couple of things. One is, I would say, data and privacy around data at an individual level needs to be thought of as a human right. I mean, in some sense, Europe has taken a lead with GDPR and is even effectively regulated that. And in our case, we took that regulation and we are in fact hoping to see more of a federal standard in the United States and in the world over. In fact, we have taken some of the subject rights of GDPR and made it available worldwide. So yes, I think we believe that data and privacy around data is a human right and it has to be protected, you have to be transparent. Now, but here's the interesting thing. I think that this term I like, which we use called data dignity, goes one step further than privacy because data that you contribute to the world is got utility. Utility for you, utility for the business that may be giving you a service in return, and the world at large. How do we account for that surplus being created around data? And who is in control around giving those rights? That's the next level of, I think, work we all need to do, where it's not just, oh, I have privacy and I just give away my data. I should be able to, in fact, control in a much more finer-grained way how my data is being used to create both utility for me and the world and the causes I care about.
Let's see with the public. Would you agree with the statement? Yes, I think we should encourage because not everybody shares your.
Yeah, I think everyone should care about their data.
Everybody should care. That's the reason.
If not, then that's a different world.
That's the reason why I wanted to get you encouraged by the reaction of the public. But could you go one step further and you could see something? I just invent the expression. I don't know whether it has been used. A data wallet for everybody. So
a data what?
Wallet.
Wallet.
So he can decide whether he actually sells the data related to him?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that these are the kind of mechanisms we should be experimenting with, which today, if you think about the exchange, what is ad-funded business model? And by the way, ad funding is not a bad business model because in some sense you're getting a free service. Yeah. But that's the only data-driven business model purely where there is value exchange. And you could even say that the value exchange is not fair because the middleman in this case, the ad broker, makes all the profit. What if this thing was split a lot more evenly? The consumer benefited a lot more than just the free service. The advertiser, whose prices, by the way, keep going up because its second price auction, in fact, goes down. So I believe some of the best economics work should happen around data dignity, and new business models in the 2020s will hopefully allow us to get there.
You spoke, you mentioned already artificial intelligence. You have written a book, Hit Refresh. I personally, I mean, I even have written this book about the fourth industrial revolution and coins in ocean, but I still have difficulties to understand the whole ethical concept around artificial intelligence. What needs actually, where are the borderlines? What do we want to capture when we talk about ethical rules?
A couple of things. So first of all, why do we think AI does mark a real departure from, let's say, the previous generation of software and software development? I think it's an important topic because for the first time, we have the ability for software to be written, so to speak, by data, as opposed to software generating data. So if you sort of think of AI at a foundational level, that's the paradigm shift.
So it's a machine learning.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So in some sense, you essentially have data generating your software, or the learning generating, being generated by data. But at the same time, I think we should not be too, what should I say, fast in abdicating our responsibility in what is happening here. For example, we have set aside, we have defined a set of principles around fairness, around robustness, around privacy, security, transparency, intelligibility of the models that are created, and accountability. Yeah. But it's not just, these are not just words. Although there's a lot of principles now that are being discussed everywhere. You need to turn it into software engineering practice. So for example, if there is a language model that gets created, you need to put in the hands of people who are developing the language model tools to debias the language model, because after all, the model did learn from the corpus of data. So I think we as tools makers, software developer, platform creators, we are very focused on building the best tool chain so that anybody involved in the process of creating AI can, in fact, by design, have the ethical principle enforced. I would say that. One of the other things we have learned is, what's the best way to ensure that there's no bias in AI? Have a diverse team. So the best way for us to, in fact, change the ethical frontier of AI is to have the diversity of the team creating the AI represent the ethics we want, so to speak. And so therefore, I think there are several mechanisms that we can create that are governors in how AI gets created for good, not for the unintended consequence. I just want to make one other point, because regulation does have a real place here. And especially regulation at the time of use. There are two types of regulations you can have. You can have regulation at the time of design and the regulation at time of use. And so I think we should be thinking a lot harder around regulation at the time of use, because facial recognition or object recognition by itself is not good or bad. It is just a technology. It's the use case that is good or bad. And so we have to be able to sort of even think about regulation so that more at the runtime, not at the design time.